with him. Through understanding the Torah comes long life, peace, and prosperity. The Lord instructed his people to meditate on his word day and night. Each week, God's people study a set portion of the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. Please join us as we study the same portion with the rest of God's people. Why study with us? Each week we spend several hours diving deeply into the study of the Torah, and our goal is to reveal the Messiah Jesus through our study, making the links between the writings of Moses and the prophets and the New Testament. Did you know that Jesus used the Torah as the basis of his teaching? And so did Paul and the other apostles. On our website, thetorahportion.org, you'll be amazed at the amount of extra material available to study each and every week. The scriptures are in both Greek and Hebrew, overviews and commentaries from the great rabbis from the past, short animated videos which are a visual illustration of the portion, maps, pictures and other interesting information from each week relating to the Torah portion. Age-appropriate material for children including colouring in, which explain the scriptures to children. Music and art, which relate to the chapters we're reading. And yes, we even have a cooking segment with food that relates to our reading. Why not invest into your own personal walk with God and make the Torah portion a regular part of your week? Join the growing community that's passionate for God, His Word, and His kingdom. Please remember to subscribe and then like and share to get the message of the kingdom to the world. And finally, we just want to sincerely thank those who are supporting us and partnering with us financially. Please enjoy the Torah portion.
Well, good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. It's so nice to see you all online here today. And for everyone who is watching on Facebook, YouTube, and those in the Zoom room, welcome. And it's Sabbath, and what better way to start the day than to study His Word. So before we get started, I will just get someone to pray. I might actually ask you, Beth, if that's okay. Do you mind starting? Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Kelly. Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this blessed day that you gave us, the Sabbath. And as we come around the Torah portion, Father, I lift up Kelly to you. And Father God, I just pray that those little gems that she has found through the week with her study, that she is able to bring them forth. Father God, I bless everyone that is on the portion this morning, and even the ones that watch it maybe later today or through the week. May they be totally blessed because they're listening to your words. In the mighty name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen.
Perfect. Thank you, Beth. I appreciate that. Well, before we get started, I just wanted to quickly share some resources to you all if you are not aware of it. A lot of those that are already in the Zoom room if are aware of this, but maybe for those that are watching on Facebook or YouTube are not. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen and we can have a look at these resources. 1 second. Okay, where are we? Okay, Google Chrome. So you should be able to see the Good News for Israel website. Are you all seeing that at the moment? Yep, perfect. Okay, so this is where all you guys can come for great resources. Greg has pulled this together. And it's basically, if you scan straight through, you can see every week of the Torah portion. And of course, this week we are up to week 45, which is Vayechanan, and it means I pleaded. And what you simply do, it gives you an overview here of the portion. You can see where my little hand is on the screen. It gives you the breakdown of the Old Testament, the Torah portion, the Haftarah, which is known as the prophets, and of course, the New Testament portion here. And if you were to click on the online lesson, you actually then go through to the next page, which gives you all the details here. Now, of course, we've been going for a year. This is actually the second time I'm taking Vayechanan. I did it last year for the very first time. So I was very excited to be taking this portion again today. But you'll actually see outlined on here other resources that Greg has included, that being on Safaria, that being from the Chabad website with like Rabbi Gordon. And I would avail yourself to some of these videos. They're awesome. I was watching them during the week. There is a little bit of a rap thing going on with these guys here, which is kind of cool. So for the young adults. And of course, it's all resources in terms of recipes and there you go, there's your truly, and maps and things like that. So if you are needing any more information while you are studying, I would suggest you head on over to Good News for Israel, and that will give you the information that you need. All righty, well, let's get into this. So as I said before, we are in week 45, which is Vahek Hanan, which means I pleaded, I besought, I implored. And the title comes from, as we always know, it's usually in the first verse of that portion where it says in Deuteronomy 3:23, I also pleaded Hanan with the Lord at that time. And this is actually quite a big portion today, and there is so much gold in it. I'm going to try and do my best to move over it and get as much as we can out of it. But of course, we will do the best we can. And we know in the past, sometimes Greg doesn't even get out of the first chapter. So we'll see how we go. So the focus today as we go through this portion is, firstly, the focus one is Moses pleading to the Lord. And we see that in chapter 3. And then we move on to the 10 statements. So we're going to just touch on that, which is also called the 10 commandments. In Hebrew, they call it the statements. And then, of course, thirdly, it will be the Shema, which we will delve into that. And there's so much goodness in that alone. Okay, so just a little bit of an idea of where we have been. Of course, we started in Deuteronomy last week, and Greg covered the first couple of chapters. And of course, we know that portion was called Devarim, which we also know it to be called Deuteronomy. So a quick summary about it. Well, just so we're up to speed before we get into this portion, we're in the 40th year and Moses is in the portion, my apologies. We're in the 40th year and Moses is speaking for about in the last 36 days. And of course, that continues in this portion as well. And we could say Devarim was the history lesson of when they had left Egypt. And Greg talked about how it was only meant to take 11 days from Mount Sinai to where they are now. But of course, he then went through in detail the path that they actually took. And you may remember, he also talked about those giants, the different names of the giants, which was quite interesting. I found that interesting. And of course, at the end of the portion of Devarim concludes with the Lord saying to them that you have seen what I have done with the two kings, Og and Sihon, enabling you to possess these lands. So too will I, the Lord, be like that towards the kingdoms in the Canaanites' lands. I will fight for you, which of course brings us up to now for this portion. So before I dive into this portion, I think it's important to point out that there's a lot of talking going on from Moses, isn't there? And his last speech seems to just goes on for quite a long time. And of course it is necessary. But I guess looking at it, you could say Vahek Hanan is broken down into 3 smaller speeches. And I just want to quickly touch on that for you now. So the first speech, you could say, starts from about Deuteronomy 4:1 to 40, which the focus is mainly on their mission and their destiny. The second speech is in Deuteronomy 5:1 to 27. And you see Moses talking about, of course, the commandments and the giving them instructions around this. You could say this focus of this section is covenant. And the third speech is in Deuteronomy 6:1 through to chapter 7, verse 11. And this is when Moses leads them through the Shema. And again, the focus, you could say, on this one is oneness. And in breaking this portion down, it provides on more clarity, direction, and intent when we read it. And what's interesting about this is that the starting and the ending speeches, or the verses, you could say the verses that bookend these different speeches help identify these smaller speeches, meaning what are those verses that help us to identify these speeches? So if I can just get someone quickly to look up Deuteronomy 6:1, Michelle, I might get you to do that if that's okay. And Cam, can you please look up Deuteronomy 7 verse 11? Michelle, when you're ready.
Just verse 1.
Just verse 1.
Now this is the instruction, the laws and the precepts which the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you might do them in the land to which you go to possess it.
Perfect. And Cam, can you please read yours?
Therefore, therefore you shall keep the commandment, the statutes and the judgments which I command you today to observe them.
So can someone here define to me what you see as the common wording in both of these verses?
Keep the commandments
And statutes.
and the statutes.
Yeah. And so what you're finding is the beginning and the end verses of all these three speeches tend to have these same the commandments, statutes, and judgments at the beginning verse and at the end verse. Now, we're not going to go through each one. You guys can go away and do that in your own time. But that's how they've come back with. That's what the sages and that say, that could be three small speeches in this one long speech of Va'ekanan. Can you see what I'm trying to say? It defines those three small speeches. All righty. So that's just a lead into this actual portion. So I'm going to just get someone to read Deuteronomy 3:23 to Deuteronomy 3:29. And Jen, can you ask one of the kids there that may want to take the reading for that, please? You good?
Yes.
Lovely.
At that time, I made my appeal to the Lord. I said, Lord and King, you have begun to show me how great you are. You have shown me how strong your hand is. You do great works and mighty acts. There isn't any God in heaven or on earth that can do what you do. Let me go across the Jordan River. Let me see the good land that is beyond it. I want to see that fine hill country and Lebanon. But the Lord was angry with me because of what you did. You wouldn't listen to me. That is enough, said the Lord. Do not speak to me any more about this matter. Go up to the highest slopes of Pisgah. Look west, north, east, and south and east. Look at the land with your own eyes. But you are not going to go across the Jordan River. So appoint Joshua as the new leader. Help him to be brave. Give him hope and strength. He will take these people across the Jordan. You will see the land, but he will lead them into it and to take it as their own. So we stayed in the valley near Beth Peor.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was very well read and very clear to understand. So, of course, it's not long now before they enter into the promised land. So can anyone remember why Moses would be imploring God to go into the promised land? I mean, isn't he just going to go in there?
He was forbidden after he struck the rock.
Oh, Leon, 10 out of 10 for you. Yeah, exactly right. Because he did strike the rock, we see that back in Numbers 20, 11 and 12. We know that God can't go back on his word, right? So, and also this was also said in front of everyone. So let's put ourselves in Moses' shoes. They're getting closer to the promised land, and Moses is wanting to cross over into the promised land to see it with his own eyes. His own lines. I don't think lines are going to see very well. It has to be eyes, doesn't it? So this land of milk and honey that God has promised to the Israelites over and over again, when we see that throughout the Torah as we've been working through it in the last year, isn't that right? And he's just spent the last 40 years with the Israelites, and he has seen it all, and the ups, the downs, and he stood for them time and time again. He's seen all these miracles, and he had heard about this promised land and this covenant probably his whole life, and now he can't enter it because of his disobedience at the waters of Meribah. And of course, he knows that Joshua is going to lead the charge into the land that God has put aside for them. So let's start with verse 23. And I pleaded with the Lord at this time, saying. So what does plead mean? So when we look at this in the Hebrew, plead, besought, is Hanan in Hebrew, hence why we get the Hanan as in the portion this week, and it's pronounced as that guttural Hanan. And it means to be gracious and show favor. So why is that? Because it comes from the root word, Hebrew word han, which is grace. So can all of you guys have a go at saying han with that ha? I know last year I struggled with it, but this year I am on top of it. I've been working on it in the last year. So what is Rashi's thoughts on this? And Rashi, for those that don't know, he's a rabbi, and we glean upon what these guys have to say, no different to how we do it today. But he, of course, they are closer to the time when all this has occurred as opposed to us. So he points out that all forms of the connected verb hahan indicate requests for an ex gratia gift, meaning a gift that is not in return for any specific good deeds or worthy action. So Moses essentially was requesting a free gift from God, from our omnipresent God. Moses was asking the Lord to show favor and grace on him. So before we talk about besought and pleaded in more detail, let's just look at why Moses might have been pleading for this. And Rashi's thoughts further on this takes us back to Exodus 33, 18 and 19, where Moses was probably remembering what the Lord had said to him. So before we read this, I'm going to get someone to read in a second. So actually, I'll get someone getting ready for it. Lynn, do you mind doing that for me? Just grabbing Exodus 33, 18 and 19, please. So before this, just to give you a context around it, Moses was up in Mount Sinai, spending time with the Lord, and Israel had built a golden calf. The Lord told him to come down and deal with the people because God was angry, of course, and Moses intervened. And God said he would wipe them out, but he didn't. But we do know some obviously did die because of their actions. It just wasn't the whole lot, as originally God was saying. Then Moses pitched a tent outside the camp. This is a very summarized version. This became the tabernacle of meeting. And then there was this dialogue that occurred between God and Moses. So what was this dialogue about? Well, God was telling him they were to move on to the promised land. He would have an angel before them to drive out the Canaanites, etc. He was asking the Lord to show him how to do this and for his presence to be with him along with the people as they embarked on this journey. So we'll hand this over to Lynn. She'll read Exodus 33, 18 and 19. Thank you.
And he said, "Please show me your glory." Then he said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." But he said, "You cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live." And the Lord said, "Here is a place by me, and you shall stand on the rock. So it shall be, while my glory passes by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock and will cover you with my hand while I pass by.
Thank you.
Then I will take away my hand and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen."
Thank you, Lynn. That's awesome. So looking at what the Lord said to Moses, it could be said that he, Moses, was asking the Lord to be gracious on him for what he was going to ask. So Moses remembered what God had said to him, and he was asking for the Lord's mercy so he could enter the promised land. And Rashi makes an interesting thought and comment on this of what maybe Moses was thinking of when he was pleading to the Lord. And that is, this is his thoughts. I'm just going to read it out to you. Moses maybe thought that after he had subdued the land of Sihon and Og, that's the Amorites, if you remember, he thought that perhaps the vow that I should not enter the land was annulled, since this was part of the land of Canaan. And so why do you think it was the part of the land of Canaan? Anyone got any thoughts there?
Because of who owned it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, as we know, Reuben, the tribe of Reuben and Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh wanted to reside there, didn't they? So Sihon and Og were the kings of the Amorites, and of which the Israelites conquered and took their land. And Rashi's thought maybe maybe Moses was thinking, well, technically, this is part of Canaan. And maybe this is part of the whole picture as well. Anyway, Rashi, makes a reference also to the Midrash, which is in the book, Rashi makes a reference to Sephri Bamrabah, which is in the Midrash. And this is a reference to when Moses goes up to the mountain of Abarim. This is a mountain range around Mount Nebo, to look at the land God has given to the Israelites in Numbers 27:12. So I'm just going to read this through to you, what was written in the Midrash. And the Lord said to Moses, go up to this Mount Abarim. This is the inheritance of the children of Reuben. When Moses entered the prospective inheritance of the children of Reuben and the children of Gad, he rejoiced, thinking, it seems to me that he has revoked his decree against me entering Eretz Israel, which means a land of Israel. He likens it to this analogy. A king decreed against his son that he might not enter the doors of his palace. He came to the gate and came behind him to the storage room and came behind him. And he was about to enter the inner chamber, and he said to him, my son, from here you are forbidden. Likewise, when Moses entered the inheritance of the children of Gad and the children of Reuben, he rejoiced, thinking, it seems to me that he has revoked his decree. Whereupon he began to pour out supplication before the Lord. However, if Moses, the great sage, the father of the sages and the father of the prophets, even though he knew that a decree had gone forth against him, did not keep himself from supplication, how much more so should this hold true for other men? So it's just looking at the word besought and pleaded. I just want to take an extract from the Mishnah Tanchuma V'ekatan 6, and it's quite a long read, and maybe you can go away and read it yourself. You can find this in Sepharia, but it is actually a really lovely dialogue that one of the sages thinks could have happened between Moses and the Lord. Now remember, this reading, it's not the Bible, but rather provides insight of what maybe Moses was thinking or could be saying to the Lord. And I guess when I read this, I think it's a really good example on the emphasis of pleading that Moses was doing. And I think to myself that I've had conversations with God, and I've pleaded on some situations, and I'm sure you have too, where we've probably found ourselves comparing ourselves to others and going, well, why, God, this happened to them, but it never happened to me, or pulling out it's not fair card. This actually provides the humanness of what Moses was doing that is relatable to us. So I'm just going to read a little bit of it to you now. Okay, so Also Moses said to the Holy One, blessed be he, by the word that I used to praise you when I said in Deuteronomy 10:14, behold, the heavens and the earth of the heavens, the earth and all that is in it belong to you, Lord God. By that very word, you are decreeing death over me when you say in Deuteronomy 31:14, behold, the days are drawing near for you to die. He said to him, Moses, I have already decreed death over the first Adam. He said to him, my master, the first Adam deserved to die. You decreed an easy commandment for him, and he transgressed it. Hence, it is fitting for him to die. And God said to him, consider Abraham then, who sanctified my name in my world, but still died. He said to him, master of the world, from Abraham there came Ishmael, whose race provoked you to anger, as stated in Job 12:6. The tents of the robbers prospered, and those who provoke God have security, the ones whom God brought forth in his hand. He said to him, consider Isaac, who stretched out his neck upon the altar. And he said to him, from Isaac there came out Esau, who in the future will destroy the temple and burn your sanctuary. He said to him, consider Jacob, out of whom there came 12 tribes without any flaw. And he said to him, Jacob did not ascend into the firmament. His feet did not trod Araphel. He was not like the ministering angels. He did not receive Torah from your hand, and he did not speak with you face to face. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, enough from you. Do not ever speak unto me of this matter again. He said to him, perhaps future generations will say, if he had not found bad things in Moses, he would not have removed him from the world. He said to him, I have already written in my Torah, in Deuteronomy 34:10, never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses. He said in front of him, the people will say, I did your will in my youth, but I did not do your will in my old age. He said to him, I have already written in Deuteronomy 32:51, it is because you acted faithlessly with me. He said to him, please let me enter the land and spend 2 or 3 years there. And after that, let me die. And he said to him in Deuteronomy 32:52, and there you shall not go. He said to him, if I am not to enter while alive, let me enter after my death. He said to him, not while you're alive and not when you are dead. He said in front of him, why all this anger against me? He said to him, because you did not sanctify me. Deuteronomy 32:51. It's a pretty interesting read, isn't it? You know, and I think, like I said, it brings that humanness out in it, that I know we have that dialogue sometimes probably go on, not every day or by any means, but maybe in our youth, I don't know. But I'll let you guys read the rest. There's more and more to that. But interesting, we also will see this with Yeshua, Jesus. And we have seen Jesus implore, beseech the Father as it is outlined in the New Testament. And we know he prayed often and he would pray before the day would begin. And we see that in Mark. And I believe he would have prayed the Shema as well, which we will talk about a little bit later. And we know he prayed passionately because in Hebrews 5:7, it says, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save from death. And he was heard because of his reverence and his holy fear of him. So like Moses, Yeshua pleaded with the Lord, imploring him with petitions and heartfelt cries. And of course, it says he was heard because of his reverence. Okay, so let's move on to the next verse, which is 24 of chapter 3. And it just says, "O Lord, you have only begun to show your servant your greatness and your mighty hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do such works and mighty acts as yours?" And so obviously Moses had seen so much that the Lord had done, as we said before, and had interceded on from the people's perspective too. And we can say, because of Moses' intercession, the Lord changed his mind on a few things, didn't he? When he actually said, oh no, they're going to get wiped out. And the next thing, Moses intercedes and, things change. And Rashi makes this comment of the mighty hand, saying, therefore, this refers to thy right hand, which is extended to all who enter the world, all human beings. He says, I speak of it as a strong hand, because by showing mercy, you forcibly subdue, that is, reduce or stop, the attribute of strict justice. And in Sephirei Devarim, which is the same references we had before, it says, you provided an opening for me to stand and pray before you for the children when you besmirched, dirtied themselves with the golden calf. Quit me and I shall destroy them. Now, was Moses holding on to the Holy One, blessed be he, when he said, quit me? This is what he said before him. Lord of the universe, you provided an opening to stand and pray for your children. Quit me implies that if you do not quit me, but beseech me, I will not destroy them. So I stood and prayed for them, and you heard my prayer and forgave their transgressions. I thought, if I stood up for them in prayer, would they not pray for me, that I may enter Israel? And does this not follow a clear conclusion? If the prayer of the one, that being Moses, for the many is thus heeded, how much more so the prayer of the many for one? So what he was saying here is that God allowed him an opening to pray for the people when they built the golden calf, the idol, and stand on their behalf. And of course he did that. He still allowed Moses to appeal for them, to beseech him, and he did not destroy the people of Israel. And the Lord heard and forgave him. But what else is he saying here? He's saying, well, I stood up for them in prayer, beseeching you, Lord, on their behalf. Would they not do the same for me so I can enter the promised land? And of course, if this prayer for one is headed, that of Moses, how much more the Lord will answer the prayer of many. But, I'm unsure whether the people of Israel were praying for him. I don't know. We don't know. But he's clearly making the point, of course, in this verse that there is no other God on heaven or on earth who can do the same mighty acts as the God of Israel. And all through the Torah, we see God is so clear to the Israelites. Do not serve any other gods beside me. And Moses is making that clear distinction that no heathen God can even compare. No power surpasses the power of our God. Have we got any questions? I'll quickly open it up. I know I've talked a bit. Okay, let's move on to verse 25. If I'm looking to the side like this here, it's because your grid of all your beautiful faces are here. And I'm just seeing if there's any reactions that I need to respond to. Okay, verse 25. Please let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, that good hill, the country, and Lebanon. And I think, Lily, you've said something about, your version was actually really lovely. Mine was, when I listened to it, it really pricked up. But I love this verse as a whole, the good land. Remember what Moses had heard about this land from God himself. Then, of course, through the 12 spies. And it says in Exodus 33:3 about the golden calf incident, God said, continue to go to the land flowing with milk and honey. And in Numbers 13:27, we see the spies come back. And of course, they also are talking about these huge cluster of grapes and pomegranates. Remember Greg talking about this, teaching on it. And the 12 spies also said, we came from the land you sent us as it is flowing with milk and honey. So imagine what Moses must have been feeling. He was so close to experiencing this, and he had seen the fruit from the promised land with his own eyes. And, I don't know about you guys, but I liken it to something smelling so wonderful all day. You've been smelling all day, like waffle cones. Do you know what I mean when you smell those yummy waffle cones, like at Royal Copenhagen? I think they're still on Cavill Ave in Surface, and it's just that waft. And then it's hitting your senses, and you've worked up the appetite to have one of these ice creams because of the waffle cone, and then you never get to have it, and it's just it's downer, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Anyway, when I was thinking about that, I was focused on the waffle cone. I'm sure you have your own smell. I'm thinking Greg probably would have said meat on a barbecue or something like that. I don't know. But you'll notice in that verse, it talks about Lebanon. And what do you think the significance of Lebanon is? It's interesting. I found it really, I've started to do a bit of a study on this, and I need to do more of a study on it because, Lebanon actually means whiteness. And the Hebrew word is Laban, which, like I said, means white, because the mountains were covered with snow and because its soil had a light coloration. The ancient Phoenicians and other nomadic tribes, they say, called the mountain Lebanon the White Mountain. Of course, it's a wooded mountain range on the border of Israel. Some other interesting facts. Lebanon, although not part of Israel, is mentioned 71 times in the Bible. Several times it is referenced to the region located north of Israel that was ruled by the Sidonians. And Lebanon was not a name of a country during the biblical era, just a geographical region. Interestingly, many times Lebanon is used in the Bible as a metaphor to glory, beauty, strength, and excellence. But I found this really interesting because when I did start looking at it, and I could be wrong, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Deuteronomy is the first time it is made reference to Lebanon. That is in Deuteronomy 1, actually. And I couldn't actually see it before that unless it was called something different. But for you guys that are in the Zoom room, can you think of any other characteristics that Lebanon is known for? Yeah, Beth.
It's used in the Song of Solomon.
Yep.
And I sort of, when I think of the word, I attribute it to beauty.
Yes, perfect. Is it the one that says his legs are like pillars of marble set upon the sockets of fine gold? His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent like the cedars. Is that the one?
Yes.
Well, that's a good pickup, Beth. And there's also another one in Songs of Solomon, which is in 4:11. And I guess it's a metaphor for scent, beautiful scent. And it says, your lips, O my bride, distilled like the honeycomb. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the scent of your garments is like the scent of Lebanon. So did anyone else have any thoughts on what a metaphor Lebanon has been used in the Bible?
Isn't Lebanon where they got all the cedar to build Solomon's temple?
Yeah, I believe it is actually. Yeah.
So it's known for its quality cedar and probably other woods as well.
Yep. Yes, that's in 2 Chronicles 9:20. You've hit it on the head there. And all the drinking utensils of King Solomon were of gold, and all the utensils of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. Of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. None was silver, was counted as nothing in the days of Solomon. I'm sure there's other references to that as well. It's also, did anyone else have anything else? Didn't want to miss anyone. It also, I'm not going to quote every verse, but yes, glory, prestigious trees, vitality, pleasure, excellence. I said scent, beauty, and obviously the state-of-the-art quality, which John made reference to in Solomon's temple. And, I'm pretty sure the tribe of Asher actually did settle in what we would now see the lower half of Lebanon today, when they moved into the promised land. That's in my study anyway. Like I said, I want to do more on it.
Kelly,
yes.
it's Julie Collins here.
Hey, Julie.
I'm an arborist in another life, but there's some really significant things that we know about the actual cedars of Lebanon. And I think one of the really interesting things is that God likens us to trees of righteousness. But what was significant about the Lebanon cedars was that they actually grew. They're one of the tallest trees. They're one of the straightest trees. They grow approximately 12 inches per year, so we get a biblical number of order.
Wow.
But they actually grow on rocky slopes and ridges at altitude. And I was considering, just as you were speaking, how, we are like trees of righteousness, but even if we're in a rocky slope or at altitude, nothing can stop us being what God would want us to be, which is upright and stately and a perfect scent. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your input and knowledge on that. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. All righty. So just before we move on, I just want to read one other thing I found from a rabbi in the Sotah 14a, which this is part of the Talmud, and it's Rabbi Samlai says, "For what reason did Moses, our teacher, greatly desire to enter into the land of Israel? Did he need to eat of its produce, or did he need to satisfy himself from its goodness? Rather, that is what Moses said. Many mitzvahs were commanded to the Jewish people, and some of them can only be fulfilled in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. So I will enter the land in order that they can be all fulfilled by me." So he was referring to fulfilling commandments in the land of Israel. So can anyone think of maybe one commandment at the very least that needs to be fulfilled in Israel, in the promised land?
The Passover?
Pardon?
The Passover, celebrating the Passover?
That's interesting because, yes, they didn't continue it, did they, through the 40 years? That's right. Well, after they, did it from the land. Yes, perfect. Anyone else? What about the first fruit offering? Yeah? I think, and maybe that's something everyone can go away and just have a look at, what commandments were actually utilized in the land, were done in the land of Israel. I'd say it's the agricultural rules as well, I would say, because that is in the land of abundance. And of course, there's many others. We won't labor on that, but there was just an interesting thought that a rabbi gave about why Moses also wanted to move into the promised land, was to be able to fulfill some of the commandments that the Lord had given them to do. Okay, and I guess obviously just better obey God's Torah at the end of the day. Okay, so we can see these links to Yeshua's instructions as well. And when he says in Matthew 5:17, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." So what does it mean when he says he came to fulfill the Torah? And sometimes these words among certain circles are understood to mean that he came to cancel the Torah by fulfilling it through his death. And in other words, I did not come to abolish or cancel, but rather fulfill it. In the Greek, fulfill in plural means complete, as we know. And you can see that I think a really good example, I was talking to Kyle about this, and he gave me a really good example about this. He said, if you were to stop at a traffic light, I was trying to say traffic and stop at the same time, didn't really work well. If you were to stop at the traffic light, have you completed that? Yes, you've obeyed it. So it's a good example of what we're trying to say here. It's completed. It's been obeyed. You see, if we read it like a lot of movements and believers around us read it, it doesn't make sense, because what do you do with this law that hasn't been cancelled and is just hanging there, but it's been completely done away with. You know, like we said with Greg, the Bible has to work. It has to make sense. And the concept of the laws having been done away with doesn't line up with what Jesus later says about keeping his commandments 2 verses later in Matthew 5:19. So can I just get, Nat, do you mind reading Matthew 5? Well, let's read Matthew 5:17 to 19. So we're just going to go over that verse I said, but I feel like we need to read it in full.
Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or one stroke of a letter will pass away from the law until all things are accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do the same will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
So the key is there is seen in verse 19, therefore whoever relaxes one of these of the least of the commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called the least of the kingdom of heaven. He doesn't want us to relax on any of them, does he? And it also doesn't line up with Jesus being the living Torah. As we know in 1 John, it talks about the word became flesh, and that was Jesus. So he is the ultimate proof and showed us how the Torah is to be kept. And of course, it also doesn't line up if he had done away with the law, with the apostles and Paul saying about keeping the Torah. It's not been done away with. And we also know it doesn't match up because Jesus kept the Sabbaths and the commands and the festivals, and we see that throughout the New Testament. That's evidently very clear when we read it. So moving on, we also see later on that Moses hammers home. Yes.
Kelly, could I just say too, this was brought home to me during the week when I had to give a communion message, and confusion came in with Marcion back in the early church times when where Yeshua talks about this is the renewed covenant. He was, you know, at the Passover meal introducing the bread, the wine. And all the translations pretty well without fail call it a new covenant when it's actually a renewed covenant. You know, the commandments are no longer in stone but written on our hearts. Yeah. But Marcion got into this Old and New Testament, and, you know, the rest is history. It's so aggravating.
Yeah, good point, Joy. And particularly for those guys that have done Hayesod, you will remember when you go through Hayesod, it talks about how the covenant, the new one, any of the covenants, when you've had the Abrahamic and then it goes to the Moses covenant, it layers on the previous one. And so too does the new covenant. I don't really want to say it. It's a layering on. It's not a doing away with.
No.
And, you know, for me, it makes sense because when it says, is it Galatians? When it says that we are, or Ephesians, we are grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel, and it, you know, makes reference to Abraham, all that stuff. If we're grafted in, what are we grafting into? That doesn't make sense to me. If it's only grafted into the New Testament, that doesn't make sense, or the New Covenant, sorry. So the covenants, and if you need more help on with that, we can talk to you about that at a later date. But it's a layering of covenants. It's not an old covenant and it's been done away with, and it's not a new one where it's just all frankly brand new and has got rid of the rest. That's not how it works. But it's a big, yes, Cam.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt what you were finishing there. I was reading during the week about Revelation, and it says that Jesus will rule with a rod of iron. And it's like, he will rule with a rod of iron for what? Towards what? Like, what is that ruling based on? And it has to be the Torah.
It's true. Good point. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate, yes, Dean. Oh, you need to take off mute, sorry.
Yep. If Jesus is our example of how to live and he fulfilled the Torah, should not we also fulfill it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and we've got to remember that when Jesus was around, there was no New Testament. He was walking out that New Testament, so to speak. So when he says that the word became flesh and he is the word, then he's referring to the Torah, the Nevi'im, the writings, the prophets, the writings. That's what he's referring to. That's what he was fulfilling. So lots of interesting conversation around that, and we could talk for ages around it. But like I said, if there's any questions on it, of course, we're always here to talk to you. But it is another big topic within itself that we would only be more than happy to talk you through and explain that to you. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. Oh boy, so good. I love all this. Okay. Oh, Jay, please.
Just a quick comment. Before we were talking about Lebanon and just looking at some of the maps, Lebanon, the south of Lebanon is included in the territory that was allotted in Numbers 34.
Yep.
But a lot of people believe that what was promised to Abraham in Genesis is a lot larger because it extends to the Euphrates River, which would include all of Lebanon.
Interesting. So, good pickup.
I don't know all of that, but yeah, it seems like Lebanon would be included in God's full promise to Israel.
All of Lebanon. Yeah, okay. Like I said, I only just started studying the dynamics of Lebanon, but there's obviously something I think important about it. And when I looked at some of the maps, I only saw Asher being the lower half of Lebanon, and I probably just need to do further study. That's a really good pickup. Thanks, Jay.
Kelly?
Yes.
Last year you said this.
Oh, I love
it. Lebanon back then was not a country.
Yes.
It was just a region.
Yes.
So that might clarify a little bit.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it's funny you said that. Actually, Lynn, I said that today too. So I'm amazed you remembered last year. So good. So good. All right. So let me just give me a second and just see where I want to finish up with my notes. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So we'll see. Let's move on. So we will see on that Moses hammers home this central point to the Israelites about keeping the Torah, and particularly when I think it's chapter 5 that he goes on through this, but not only now, but throughout the generations. And of course, it also I'll just leave that there. So Jesus relays the same principle to us in Matthew 5:16. It's all around Matthew 5 today. And just for the sake of time, I'm just going to read this just so we can move it through, where it says, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." So what was he saying? By fulfilling the Torah, we draw closer to the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so verse 26 of Deuteronomy. "But the Lord was angry with me because of you and would not listen to me. And the Lord said to me, 'Enough from you. Do not speak to me on this matter again.'" So we know Moses is obviously not happy about this. And we see he makes mention of this again in Deuteronomy 4:21. And why do you think the Lord was angry? Getting cranky with him. I mean, we know that what he did at the waters of Meribah. It's like, oh, yes. Belshaws. I can't see in the distance, so I'm like, Belshaws?
Sorry, Kel. I think it's because he's still blaming the people of Israel and he's not taking ownership for his own sin.
So he
Yeah,
hasn't
interesting.
music, so he can't.
That's true. And I think with Cam, did you want to add something there before I continue?
The only thought I had was that, like, you know, when you ask your dad and you keep asking, he says, "Don't ask me again." I was
Is that what
thinking
happened
that
with you?
might have. I had a friend that
All been
happened
there,
to.
right? All been there. Yeah, well, Psalms 106:32 does provide a little bit of insight on this. So it actually says, here it is, Psalms 28-33. My apologies. They joined themselves also unto Baal Peor and ate the sacrifice of the dead. Thus they provoked him to anger with their intentions, and the plague broke up upon them. Then stood up Phinehas and executed judgment, so the plague was stayed, and that was counted unto him for righteousness unto all generations forevermore. They angered him also at the waters of strife, so that it went ill with Moses for the sakes, because they provoked his spirit, so that he spake unadvisedly with his lips. So I'm sure this prompts all your thoughts where we've been with all this. And it says that Moses provoked his spirit. It was clear Moses was not to speak on this matter again. And it just shows you that we don't always get what we want. And it seemed from previous history, Moses got what he asked for, but not even as in Moses got what he asked for when he interceded for the children of Israel, but not even Moses got everything he wanted. And if we fast forward in scripture to John 15:16, it says, so I'm just reading this, like I said, because we've got so much to go through, but don't worry, in the next hour, I'll get you guys reading. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. So sometimes it is a no, isn't it? The things we ask for. And I think the key here is at the beginning of this verse where it says he chose us, not us choosing him, as we bear his fruit, and we are called to bear his fruit. So if we are aligned to him, then the things we ask for align with what he has placed in our heart. And let's face it, you know, if God gave me everything I asked for in prayer, I would be God. You know, I would change the color of the sky. I would want this. I mean, that's what it would be like. But we're not God, and God deserves the right to say no. And like I said, he also calls us to bear fruit. And I guess the question could be asked, does what we ask bear fruit? And we see in James, it says in James 4:3, you ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on passions, you adulterous people. When we pray, we just have to trust God's wisdom, and know that he has our best interests in mind. And of course, we see it interesting. It's interesting because we see this displayed with Yeshua. So what do you think? I think I touched on it earlier, so I probably have given it away. But what did Yeshua ask God for? Might have been a few things, but what was something very significant? Sorry, Beth?
On the night that he was betrayed, he asked his father if he would take the cup of suffering from him. Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty huge. Like, he knew obviously the job ahead of him, what he was meant to do here on earth. And we see this in Mark 14:36, where it says, Abba, Father, all these things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but your will. And of course, we see Jesus go on to die on the cross. So I think I might stop there because we're going to be moving into the next verse, and I don't want to get halfway through and get stuck. Sorry, Jay, before we stop, yes.
Quick thing, every time that Moses interceded for the people of Israel, God had made a covenant with the whole of Israel that he would bring them into the promised land, or he made a covenant with Abraham that he would bring his descendants into the promised land. So God couldn't destroy them without breaking his covenant. Or if he kept Moses, but Moses was saying, well, you've made a covenant, you can't do that. But God never made a covenant with Moses that he would bring Moses into the land. So God could just say no.
I guess so. But that's a good point. But I guess also the generation that was there also got wiped out, and they were told they weren't going in. So it was the generations after that came in. Hey, so
Kelly, I like
yes.
John chapter 17, where Jesus prays the intercessory prayer in the garden, and he actually prays for us today, for us to enter into his promises. And I just see that marry up beautifully with all the intercession Moses did. And he didn't go into that physical promised land. Jesus didn't stay on earth and establish that kingdom in the physical, but he made the way for it. So that was just
lovely. Yeah, lovely link there, Julie. That's really good. Thank you. Thanks for your input. Well, for those that are watching on Facebook or YouTube, please feel free to come across and join us in the Zoom room for the second hour, as we won't be broadcasting for the second hour on Facebook and YouTube, but you are so welcome to come across. Just go to the Good News for Israel website and /Torah, and you will see the Zoom link there. But other than that, we'll see everyone else on the other side in the Zoom room in the next hour. Thank you. Have a great day.